Welcome to the Rural Revival Podcast. I'm your host, Dana Larson. This week, we're taking you to an exciting new place in downtown Grinnell, Iowa, in our interview with Angela Harrington. Angela is the owner of Hotel Grinnell and has led the charge in converting this former school building into an incredible contemporary boutique hotel. And we found out she just happens to have a lot of experience in small town economic development. She is a wealth of knowledge, and I would encourage you to grab a pen and paper and get ready to take some serious notes, because this interview is packed full of valuable information that I believe can help any small business as they're getting started. So here we go with Angela Harrington. Well, today we are with Angela Harrington in Grinnell, Iowa at the pretty newly opened Hotel Grinnell. Thanks for being with us.
Thank you for having me.
I'm excited to have you share with people about this whole project. I am so amazed by it. I love the creativity behind it. This is such a cool place, and it's such a just out-of-the-box great concept that I think people are going to love. So
thank you.
Yeah. Tell us a little bit about you and your story and kind of what led you here.
Well, I would tell you that I'm likely to be labeled as a serial entrepreneur, but my early days were spent very much as an intrapreneur. I would have a project with a company that, an idea that they had, that they would give me the headline, and then I'd have to figure out how to build an offshoot of their business, that kind of thing. So I spent my 20s as an intrapreneur. And then in my 30s, I decided that I needed to be an entrepreneur, and I owned a summer camp for 9 years. And then I lost my mind and went into the restaurant business. And I spent a number of years in the restaurant business until the great crash of '08. My son at the time was little, and I decided I got to take a break from Mr. Toad's wild ride of entrepreneurship and have a normal job. And I really, over the years as an intrapreneur or an entrepreneur, I was very involved in the community, whatever community I happened to be in at the time. And I decided I really loved my volunteer work. And so I thought that I might reinvent myself as a community development type of person. So I was doing a consulting project as a volunteer for a Chamber of Commerce. And through that project, I noticed that there was a chamber job open in Grinnell. And in small places, the community development and chamber job and also convention and visitors bureau is all one thing. And I decided, you know what, I'd like to do that. So they hired me, thankfully, to do that, and I did that for 10 years. But the story of this hotel starts the day I walked in that door of the chamber. So realizing I had 10 years under my belt as an intrapreneur with some really great mentors, and 10 years on my own as an entrepreneur in 3 businesses. I had a consulting business, I owned several restaurants, and the summer camp. So I had that experience behind me. And so my first marching orders from the board that I now worked for as the president of the chamber and the CVB was that we really need an event center. There's nowhere to have a wedding in the small town. People want to come back to their hometown, get married, that kind of thing. There's really nowhere to have that. We have a fantastic college, but they're in the business of a college, and they have limited availability, both for weddings and, different kind of conferences and so forth. So that is when it started. So I started researching, okay, what in the world does it take to do an event center in a small town? Because lots of times what happens is people get all kinds of enthusiasm for a project like that, but if you can't figure out how to make it self-sustaining in a small town, its life is going to be very short-lived, okay? Because there's just not enough resources to go around to fundraise when we have our own, issues of there are pretty pressing needs in some cases with poverty and, things that are more pressing than we need an event center to have a wedding. So it really needed to be self-sustaining so that it wasn't a burden on the community and have the opposite effect that it would be an economic driver. So I quickly figured out from research that I did that an event center has to have a hotel. Not necessarily the other way around. Hotels don't need event centers, but event centers really need hotels. So that kind of started that thinking. I really am passionate about historic preservation, smart historic preservation, especially when it comes to being an impetus for private investment. Because, there's not enough holes in the earth to put all of the old buildings in, right? There's just not enough holes.
Yeah.
And in a small place, it's one of our only natural resources. We don't have a critical mass of population that naturally drives really big things happening, okay? We don't have all that money swirling around in the local economy that somebody's going to say, oh my gosh, I can't wait to start my business. So that's really an issue we need to pay attention to. So we don't have that population base and a lot of money to attract investment. In our case in Grinnell, we have a really solid industry base. We have a world-famous college, but we don't have natural resources that are going to naturally drive visitors. We don't have the mountains or an ocean, that kind of thing, right? But guess what our natural resource is? Shitty old buildings. We have lots and lots and lots of them. Because over the years, the ebb and flow of the economy, since about the 50s, was really kind of left out the small places, because what's happening is that you need more and more to make things go. And when you have a pretty finite population, pretty finite economy, some of those old buildings were left behind. And also, globalization and the Walmart phenomenon, all of those things, and then, now the Amazon thing. So it left a lot of the brick and mortars behind.
Yes.
So because Iowa has such a great match in historic preservation, not all states match the federal historic preservation tax credit programs.
Oh, interesting.
So in Iowa, that's why you're really seeing some great things happen, and you have for about 10 years, even longer than that, but in my brain, it's like the last 10 years has been pretty fantastic with the Main Street things that have happened.
Yeah.
So those old buildings are tremendous reasons for investment, because you can't possibly address opportunity cost without some kind of incentive or special way to spur that investment, okay? Because opportunity cost, I could spend $7 million in Des Moines and have that risk not be as big as if I do it in a small town, right? Mm-hmm. So you have to have those kinds of things that mitigate a bit of that risk. So I'll tell you, this hotel would have never happened, as many, many things in small places, without the historic tax credit program of the state of Iowa and also of National Park Service. So it'd be very difficult to do a ground up hotel, because if you don't have some of that mitigation, granted, it's more expensive to renovate a historic building because you're trying to preserve, which costs money.
Yeah.
But at the same time, you couldn't do a $7 million investment without that piece, because the opportunity cost is too great. I'm losing out on an opportunity with that set pile of money in a bigger place, and it's too risky. So you're mitigating risk and addressing opportunity cost with incentives that, again, tie into our natural resource of shitty old buildings. So I'm figuring out that in order to do the board, follow through with their kind of community development, their first task as I walk in the door, we need an event center. So figured out it needed to be a hotel. And then this building, luckily, is in the center of downtown.
Which, just to interject, the downtown is incredible.
Yeah.
Great old historic buildings.
Yes.
Yeah.
One thing I'll tell you, that we have a great city manager that's progressive and forward thinking. And also a guy by the name of Bill Menner ran it wasn't called Main Street program, but it It was called Renaissance, which you would love because it's like revival. And he really got people talking about the need to do second-story housing in small places and in Grinnell specifically.
Okay.
And Grinnell took that and ran with it. He's a resident, he's a longtime Grinnellian, but that's a lot to do with downtown because they figured out, there are these programs to help me put second-story housing in all these old buildings, and that's what makes those buildings then pencil out because you've got the residential piece upstairs and the retail piece downstairs. By themselves, can't make that building go, but second-story housing, and that's what you need to make Main Street businesses go, is
Sure.
people close by living, not far away, but upstairs. And that's why when I learned more and more about hotels. Now, I would tell you that I put myself through college working lots and lots of jobs, and probably the main one was working at the front desk at the Holiday Inn in downtown Denver. But I digress. So, the holy grail for small towns is really 18-hour vitality, because that's what millennials and Gen X, they want 18-hour vitality. They want things going on, stuff to do, fun, kind of things. The vibe has to be buzzing because they're used to buzz, and if you can't find that buzz, it's going to be harder and harder to get young people to call this home. And there's 3 ways that money comes into a town, right? So you've got the residents, and you've got the workers, and you've got visitors, okay? So residents need that 18-hour vitality to find this compelling. And if we don't really address 18-hour vitality, we cannot possibly be competitive with places like Chicago, Denver, Des Moines. But a few things we have going for us, if towns really pay attention to density and filling in those, places to live very close to downtown, we might not have a big sprawling vitality, but we can sure pack it all in to a really small place if you watch your density.
Yeah.
Right? Okay.
Wow.
So it became very clear to me that I can't think of another business that creates 18-hour vitality like a hotel. Because all of a sudden, you're getting a whole new group of people in the visitor piece. As I told you, there's 3 pieces. The hard part of, towns is getting that third piece, that visitor piece. So How do you do that? You got to bring them right to you and get them right downtown. Because that adds to the resident, and all of a sudden, then everybody feels like we have it going on, instead of feeling like you roll up the streets at 5 o'clock and, why would I want to live there?
Yeah.
So that I really became passionate about that very, very early, about the hotel as a catalyst for 18-hour vitality. So that really kept me in it, because this was not easy. The whole process, like I said, 10 years ago is when the concept first entered my brain that I must figure out how to do an event center and thereby a hotel. Because Grinnell, in prior years, really got the residence piece. It really watched its density. You had one guy, really preaching about the second-story housing, and then the other really watching the density and making sure to control that. So that really got the workforce it got that residential piece packing as much vitality as it could into the downtown. And you've got to work on your core. We've already seen what suburban sprawl has done to downtowns, and now everybody's moving back downtown.
It's so true.
Because we figured out that we need that density and the vitality, and that comes in wherever the city's heart beats. That's what has to be developed first, not the rings, and then we're going to you got to develop that core. So the great things that are going on in Des Moines even, you see that. But if you're not really working on that core, and it's, this is a really walkable city, it's a bikeable city. It's one of the things I hear from our guests is that I did not have to move the car.
That's so great.
Right? We went to breakfast, we went to dinner, I visited my kid in school, or I went, I'm doing a staycation, I went golfing. I never moved the car. So it's really a cool thing. But a hotel, there's that three-legged stool of getting visitors, workers, and residents all kind of swirl around together in the downtown. But the bigger businesses that needed big space all are located on the interstate or far from downtown. So the economic impact of that workforce is not as contributing as if they were really close by. But that's common. So you have to get that other piece to really pop, which is that visitor piece. And that's why I became quite determined that one way or another we were going to open a hotel. But I wanted the hotel to, people need variety, right? And I knew that, we have already 300 guest rooms in Grinnell. And they're all at the interstate, except for a few B&Bs close to downtown. But I knew that we needed to occupy a different space because half of all the consumers in the world are wanting an upscale or luxury, and we're missing out on that piece. And see, I was kind of dangerous in a way because I was, running the Convention and Visitors Bureau, and I would host cocktail parties, or things for different people. And parents at the college, I would say, "Oh yeah, where are you staying?" At the Marriott in Des Moines. Oh my God, what a lost opportunity. Let's figure out, So it just added fuel to the fire because, and there's a local company in town that I said, have you always used all these hotel rooms in Grinnell, Iowa? It's a local company. And they said, no, because these are people that are our customers, and it is very important that we have a certain level of service. And so we have typically housed them in Des Moines and then brought them in. So I was like, oh, and think of all that revenue that the town missed out on.
Absolutely.
And it's not that we absolutely need every single one of those hotels at the interstate because that occupies those different choices too. But it's about variety. I had a snarky person, I get that from time to time. I had a snarky person say on social media, "What do we need a new hotel for? We already have 5 at the interstate." And typically I say nothing, right? I say nothing. It'll just get people started. I just don't have time for it, right? But I replied back, that's like saying that because we have a McDonald's, we're good to go. We don't need any more restaurants. We have a McDonald's. No, you need variety. That's the part of the piece, other than vitality and movement and vibe. You need variety to attract workforce and visitors and residents.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And that's the thing that allows for, when you have greater population in bigger towns, that allows for greater variety. So if you only have one choice of restaurant in town and then you have 100 choices in a big town, that variety is really a competitive disadvantage of a small town.
Sure.
But variety is hard to do because a lot of variety takes a lot of more money churning in the economy. I mean, we're not going to be able to have 100 restaurants in Grinnell, but so you got to be really strategic when you're in community development in a small town or as a business owner, really figuring out what variety can you add that you don't need lots and lots and lots of more people to make happen.
Sure.
So just that is...
It's great background just to know
Thanks.
kind of what went into all of this.
Yeah. So it became apparent that 2 things. So when we identified the building, and luckily a friend of mine says nothing ever good happens in community development unless you control the real estate. Luckily, this real estate was controlled by the city, and the city wants 18-hour vitality and cool things to happen too, right? So luckily, they owned the building. So the first thing was trying to figure out, how do you make this work financially? That was the journey, right? So the historic tax credit piece was the first one. So this building that we're sitting in was so much of the fabric was taken out in the 80s. We'll have to go back and...
Yeah, tell us about the history of it.
So the building was built in 1921 as the city's junior high school. And then 40 years later, in the 70s, it is my belief that three things were happening at the time that made him give up. First of all, we did not have the technology and the know-how and the resources or the drive or the understanding of historic preservation in the 70s. Okay, there just wasn't. If a building was going to fall down, it was going to fall down. This building was rock solid, great bones, built in 1921, whereas the high school that was first was built in 1900. And just in that 20 years, they figured out a lot about foundations and that sort of thing. So this building stood the test of time, whereas the beautiful high school that was built in 1900 did not.
Wow.
So fast forward to the 70s. There's an energy crisis going on. The ADA rules are starting to gain momentum. And asbestos is also thought, is something going on there? So those things were happening, and that's my opinion, but all over the country in the 70s, lots of buildings that were in 1900. You know, buildings have a life.
Yeah.
And if you're not going to really reinvest, they have a life. Mm-hmm. So we had the huge industrial boom, right? All across the country, 1900. We're building stuff everywhere, you know, the revolution, right?
Yeah.
So a lot of things were built at that time. And then by the 70s, they're wearing out. And so in this case, the building was worn out, and those three things were happening. So as is common, the school gifted it to the city, which is a gift that kept on giving. Because it's really hard to figure out what to do with the big beast. It's 65,000 square feet.
Wow.
I mean, in the smaller downtown buildings, you know, it's more, we're going to put residential upstairs, great loft apartments upstairs, and then retail or office in the downstairs.
It's manageable. Yeah.
It's manageable. But 65,000 square feet, holy moly. So they said, we'll turn it into a community center. So I would tell you, if you added up all the hours of the day, they put some offices in here, there was some city offices, but all told, with all the 65,000 square feet and all the days of the year, there's probably about 80% unoccupied. Or let's just say, you know, quiet and not it was very underutilized. That's the best way to put it. So they had it for 40 years. And a great blessing is that the city owned it, and so they kept the bones.
Okay,
But
good, yeah.
They kept the bones intact. They didn't let things fall apart. You know, when it needed a new roof, it didn't wait for 10 years to get a new roof. It got a new roof.
Yeah.
So that was great. But aesthetically, they were a disaster because they did things like, and it was coming all over, not they personally, but all over the place. They dropped the ceilings to, you know, from the glorious 12-foot, 15-foot ceilings down to 8 or 9 feet, added that horrible acoustic tile.
Yes.
And boarded up a bunch of windows. And it was just ugly.
Yes.
Along with, it was 70s ugly. So after we identified the building, tried to put all the pieces left together. So we had it looked like we were going to be able to use historic tax credits. It looked like there were 2 other programs that would, again, mitigate that risk to be manageable and to allow for a luxury hotel and 2 big public spaces in a ballroom and an auditorium to somehow be managed in a town of 10,000. Daunting on the risk scale. Okay.
Yeah.
So it looked like financially we were going to be able to pencil it out, but there were 2 things that happened. I looked for an operator. I had a lot of contacts by then in hospitality as far as operators. We needed an operator and we needed a private investor. So I looked for years and years to find the private investment piece. I looked locally, and again, the opportunity cost and the risk of doing it in a small town. You don't see luxury hotels in small towns for a reason, because you just can't make it pencil out, and the opportunity cost is calling their money elsewhere.
Yes.
So then I reached out to a guy that was a pretty famous guy in the hotel world. He was a Grinnell alum. He went to college here, and he was a trustee. So I reached out to him and I said, I really need some help. I can't find the investment piece. I can't find an operator. And so I flew to Denver. He's like, well, I'd like to hear what you have to say. Come on, because I told him, and he was in Colorado. And I said, oh, I'm from Colorado. I'm actually coming home in a couple of weeks. He said, well, come a day early. I'll clear my schedule. This is a guy who owns Magnolia Hotels, which has hotels all over in big cities. They're 300 rooms. This is one of the great independent
their hotels are beautiful
hotel stories in the country. So I spent the day, and then and I said I just think it's got to be. I mean, at that point, it almost felt like, I don't know, small deserves variety, vitality, and people making those things happen too.
Yeah.
Right? So, and so many of the incentives, so many of the programs and all are all geared to big places.
It's true.
Yeah. And small gets nothing. Or the rule they can apply, but the rules are such that, so that it can't happen. So anyway, the capital stack was kind of there, looked like it was going to happen. And then the last pieces were, who are we going to get to operate it? Who's going to be the private investment piece? And because of my background, my investor, the man from the college said, okay, kid, you run it and I'll put my money in. Let's give it a shot.
So cool.
So we were off and running. So then the capital stack at this point, which is, all of the monies that you're going to need to make it go. I mean, private investment piece, no one's writing a cash check for all of it,
Yeah.
So it was so complex at that point that it was way over my head. I didn't have the chops to figure it out. So I reached out to a guy by the name of Jake Christensen, who owns Christensen Development, and he was really integral in the redevelopment of the East Village.
Oh, yeah.
And I said, I've got this project, and now I think it's going to work, but it's got such a complex financial puzzle that I don't even know how to make the pro forma look right, So he, I don't know, took pity on me or decided, okay, I'll help you out. But he jumped in and took it across the finish line for the money piece, because it wouldn't have happened otherwise. One of the important takeaways, just because you're in a small place doesn't mean there aren't people in the world that have, vast experience that won't help you. So now I had a famous hotel, owner at my side, and I had a famous realtor. In Iowa, I consider him the best of the best.
Yeah.
I had him on the other side, and with that two experiences, and I'm more of a marketing and a PR person and operations. So I was operations and marketing, and one was finance, and one was an industry genius. So.
Yeah. That's amazing.
Yeah. So
I love it.
Thanks to all of those people along the way that helped. So we were just under construction 10 months, and then opened last September.
So the majority of your work was casting vision and getting all of those main things in place.
Yeah. Putting the puzzle, it's a big puzzle. So putting all the pieces together that generally make a business go, and any smart business plan. But at the same time, this was really challenging because you didn't have the natural economic factors that you could easily attract investment, the bank loan. Those were serious obstacles.
Wow.
So, but where there's a will, there's a way.
Yeah, I'm glad you had the long-term vision to see it through.
Thank you.
Aren't you loving our interview with Angela? There was so much good content that instead of cutting out some of the interview to keep it under an hour, we decided to keep the content and split it up into 2 weeks. So we'll be back here next week as Angela continues to share her story about Hotel Grinnell. In the meantime, you can check out our blog at ruralrevival.co for more information, and also head to hotelgrinnell.com. Have a great day, everybody, and we'll be back here with you next week.